Okay, good morning or good afternoon. Welcome to the virtual office hours for the Appalachian Diabetes Network. We are so happy to have you here today. We have a special guest speaker from the Balm in Gilead, Dr. Tanya Henderson, who is here today to talk with us about brain health and dementia or Alzheimer's awareness. June is Alzheimer's Awareness Month, and she will be talking with us about dementia and Alzheimer's as it relates to African Americans. The Balm in Gilead is the National Brain Health Center for African Americans, and I'm probably not wording that right. Dr. Henderson has over 30 years of experience in public health. She has experience teaching at an academic university, a minority serving university, and she has a wealth of experience in HIV/AIDS and workforce diversity. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Tanya Henderson.
Thank you very much, Regina. And I'm going to share my screen. Let's make sure that works. Oh, I was already doing it, right? Let me start from the beginning. And good morning, everybody. I am going to be talking to you today about brain health in African Americans. I actually am the project director for the Southeast Diabetes Faith Initiative. Pamela Price is the deputy director, and she usually represents the Brain Health Center, but she is not available today. So I'm your choice for today. So we're going to be talking about the brain. And I think a lot of people don't think about brain health because that's not something that we get regular checkups about. We get our blood pressure checked, we get our, people listen to our lungs, they listen to our heart, but they don't really mention the brain. But the brain, of course, is one of the most important parts of your body. We're gonna talk more about that later.
Sorry to interrupt. I don't see your slides.
Oh, you don't? Okay, let me hold on. Let me go back and because I clicked share screen.
Yeah, make sure you choose the window you want to share when you hit share.
Okay. And Regina, if I'm not able to do it, you have them, right? Okay, can you see them now?
Yeah.
Okay, let me start. I'll just put the first slide up again. Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you. My nice picture of the brain and the different lobes and parts. So we know that the brain performs an incredible number of tasks, including controlling body temperature, blood pressure, heart rate, breathing. It accepts the flood of information from the world around you and from your various senses, how we see, hear, smell, taste, and touch. Handles your physical movement when walking, talking, standing, and sitting, and it lets you dream, reason, and experience emotions. And I'm not going to sit here and read all my slides to you. You can read those yourself. But when I think about the brain health, my mind instantly goes to my parents. My father died of dementia. Dementia is just one of the many things that happen to your brain that can cause harm to you. He was an alcoholic, probably drank most of his life. And so when he became ill, he was in his 80s when this happened, of course. When he became ill and had to go in the hospital and he went through detox, the doctors told us that the detox could kill him quicker than what was wrong with him could. So what I learned from that was that alcohol in its negative form can still be beneficial to one's brain, especially if they've been existing on it for many, many years. My mother also, my mother did not have dementia. My mother lived to be, her father died in his 80s. my mother lived to be 97. And whereas there wasn't a lot physically wrong with her toward the end, she just simply died of old age. But there were some instances where when she would get one of her levels would get off kilter. If her potassium would drop, if her sodium dropped, if any of the various bodily functions that exist would get, off kilter, it would affect her brain function. And you don't really think about, and that's something that's very common among elderly people, especially if they get infections and that sort of thing. But the doctors told me when she was going through some of this, that the brain is just like the rest of your body. It ages. You live your entire life, and then, as I said, your brain ages along with your body. But there are things that you can do to preserve those things through your life. So we're and it's funny to me that we're just really putting a lot of emphasis on brain health. I think it's been a mystery for in terms of health a lot through the years, but we're coming to a better realization of the importance of brain health. So the different functions that I mentioned a few minutes ago, like senses and touch and whatever, the brain will function across all these different things: your cognitive health, your motor function, your emotional function, your tactile function. We've just come out of a year of COVID-19 and quarantines and isolations that none of us thought we would ever have to go through. But what the medical profession is saying, that during that time, psychologists and psychiatrists have had more diagnoses and they've treated more people for mental health during that time. There was a great rise in mental health diagnoses during that time, because I think that when you're in your grind and you're doing your day-to-day routine, you don't really give your brain an opportunity to waver. But during COVID, we were isolated, and it really made people pay attention more to their thoughts and their actions. And so that in itself, points to brain health. And we know very well that brain health can, as I mentioned a few minutes ago with my parents, brain health can be affected by age-related changes in the brain. There are also injuries, such as stroke or traumatic brain injury, mood disorders, such as depression, substance use, as I mentioned, addiction, diseases such as Alzheimer's disease. And I think people are more familiar with Alzheimer's, but Alzheimer's is just one type of dementia. There are many, many types. And so these are some of the factors that can affect the brain, and while some of these cannot be changed, there are many lifestyle changes that make a difference. Even the notion of sleep, we don't realize that there are some people that say they don't sleep well. But when you don't sleep well, your brain does not have is not able to, and the way it was explained to me, that when you sleep, your brain drains, and it drains of all the toxins that have built up in your system throughout the day. And sleep helps you to expel those toxins. So a healthy brain can perform all the mental processes that are collectively known as cognition, including the ability to learn new things, intuition, judgment, language, and remembering. And as I mentioned, Alzheimer's is the most common. We focus on stroke because stroke is something that if you catch a stroke within the first few minutes, you may be able to not make the damage permanent to the brain. And it is damage to the brain from a stroke. Epilepsy, I have a family member that's epileptic. it's something that is not a whole lot is known about how a person develops it, or it, and in some cases it's hereditary, in some cases it's not. But again, I think that we're learning more and more about the brain, and traumatic brain injury, of course, head injuries can debilitate a person for life, because again, you're affecting the part of your body that tells your body to do everything that it can. So traumatic brain injury can end up being cause a person not to be able to walk, or not to be able to talk, or not be able to move their limbs, depending on the part of the brain that is damaged. So making these a part of your routine can help you function better. You want to take care of your physical health. As I mentioned, I manage the Southeast Diabetes Faith Initiative. And what we do is we try to help persons who are prone or at risk for diabetes not develop diabetes. Diabetes is something that can be reversed. Well, I won't say that can be reversed. Some people believe it can be reversed. But if you're within what they call the pre-diabetic range, you don't necessarily have to move into diabetes, or at least through our program, you can delay the onset. You want to manage your blood pressure. Blood pressure, of course, it also affects, how the brain how the blood that pumps from your heart goes to your brain. Eat healthy foods, be physically active. Both of those things are things that the Southeast Diabetes Faith Initiatives focus on. Of course, asking people to maintain 150 minutes of physical activity per week, and eating healthy foods to help them lose a certain amount of weight are ways that you help your body to function better. Keeping your mind active, doing puzzles, doing brain teasers. We spend so much time on the computer nowadays that we don't really think about having fun with our brains. And those are things, there are definitely little things that you can do with your brain each day to keep it more active. And that's really important as people age. One thing about my grandmother was that she read the newspaper every single day. And that she read the newspaper, into her 80s when she passed away. And when I realized that she was in a steady decline was when she no longer asked for that newspaper. So that was a way for her to keep her mind active. Staying connected with social activities. We are a people that like to be connected. And that's another thing that COVID affected for us. We weren't able to maintain some of the social activities that we usually did. But and for that reason, a lot of people did turn to social media and things like that to maintain those social connections. Manage stress. Stress is definitely a negative to your brain, because it does not allow, stress affects your body, it affects your mind. And then reduce risk to cognitive health is also something that you can do to help your brain function better. And people really don't think a lot about the fact that their bodily health really does affect their brain health. So I'm going to talk to you today about the National Brain Center for African Americans that was conceived by the Balm and Gilead. And the mission is to raise the awareness of the issues of cognitive health among African Americans by working through the networks of faith-based institutions and by establishing partnerships with organizations and individuals dedicated to our mission. The Balm and Gilead's been around for 32 years, I believe now. It was founded by Dr. Prenessa Seal, and its original mission was to outreach to the faith community around HIV and AIDS. And if anybody is a person of faith, you know that is a daunting task. But through the years, we recognize that HIV and AIDS is not the only thing that affects African Americans. That African Americans are disproportionately affected by most health issues. And so we have branched out and we've begun to reach out to the faith community around all health disparities. And as you well know, the faith community is the hub of activity for African Americans. During the Civil Rights Movement, the Civil Rights Movement was born out of the Black church. And so that is a good way and the best way that we have found to reach people. Not only do you reach the people in the pews, you reach the people in the communities where the churches exist. So the churches or other faith communities, because our work is not just the Christian church. We also work with mosques, Catholic churches, and Jewish temples and kingdom halls. So we work with any faith community around trying to reduce the effect of health disparities on African Americans. The Brain Center serves as an information hub on the human brain that can be shared throughout all networks that reach and touch approximately 40 million African Americans living in the United States. And we have 3 focus areas: brain health education, mobilization and advocacy, and networking. So we're going to talk a little bit about each one. Now, I've mentioned Alzheimer's, stroke, epilepsy, and traumatic brain injury. Those disorders of the brain are the focus of our brain health education. And we just want to make sure that the public know that those things do disproportionately affect African Americans and understand the ways that they can keep themselves healthy and then as a result, keep their brains healthy. So the center provides culturally competent resources and training to healthcare providers and faith communities serving African Americans. So often we go into churches and we do workshops and lectures around brain health, and we train people within churches and other faith communities how to provide information to their congregations in the community, and also how to recognize signs and make referrals when needed, when people have issues around their brain health. So in terms of mobilization and advocacy, we also mobilize communities and individuals in understanding and participating in services. You know, caregiving for someone with a brain injury is really, it's something that you never think you would have to do, but you know, you're the person who has to take care of a loved one when something happens. And also brain health equity, making sure that every person, every human being is given the same amount of health equity when it comes to their brain health. That services are not just provided for the people with money or people of a certain color or people of a certain station in life, that people have, that through health equity, major obstacles to health are eliminated. So, and that's a big emphasis of our efforts. And then networking, of course. Networking is something that we all need to do and do well on eliminating health disparities among African Americans. No one organization can do it alone. And it's going to take all of us together to make sure that brain health is something that everybody is entitled to and that they know the ways to keep their brain healthy. In order to promote the health and quality of life of all Americans, the National Brain Health Center is asking everybody to join our network of organizations and individuals who are dedicated to raise awareness on the cognitive health among African Americans. So we invite you to join our Brain Center network as well. In terms of resources, we are also a repository for resources around brain health. If you go to our website, which is brainhealthcenterforafricanamericans.org /resources, you will see an array of information that has been very carefully selected and is very useful for working with clients, working with individuals. Support for the caregiver is something that is just very imperative because, as I mentioned in terms of my own personal life, I watched my mother care for my father. She did not want him to go to a nursing home. She kept him at home, of course, as long as she could, but it began to wear on her health. And so then we had to have someone come in and assist her. And for seniors, that can be very disconcerting to have people come into their home to take care of them. They never, thought that they would not be in a position to take care of themselves. But caregiving resources was a big help for my mother. She was able to get people to come in and just sit with my dad some days to, so she could, just get a break. So she could do some self-care for herself. And one thing that a lot of people with dementia and Alzheimer's get is what they call the sundown syndrome. Whereas when most people's minds are going to sleep, they're up. So we ended up having to get somebody to come in the house just to be there. So when he'd roam the house all night. We had to do things like lock the doors from the inside. We had to even lock the gate because he was a very active man in his heyday. He loved going out and working in the yard and cutting grass and doing things. So we had to put a lock on the gate so he could just go out. And one day he just stacked concrete blocks. He just did that all day. And that was just something he did to keep his mind healthy as he could in the state that he was in. But the thing about caregiving resources is, people get to the point that they don't know you. There are many stories in the media that talk about people who forget their children, and that's very, very hard on children many times. There was I forget who the person was, and if somebody can remember, please mention it. There was some public figure whose husband had Alzheimer's. He went in a nursing home and he forgot who she was and fell in love with another resident of the nursing home, which, and she wrote about it and talked about how she realized he was happy. So that was her consolation. And there are many stories like that, but you realize that when a person's brain is affected, it's not their fault. So you really have to, and that's another element of caregiving that you have to tell people about. There's a webinar presentation on our website called the Alzheimer's in African Americans. There's a stroke webinar presentation. And I'm not the best person to brief you on strokes, but I know there's an acronym that tells you what to do if you think there's a stroke happening. And there was a case last week where a woman was on a Zoom just like we are now, and she noticed that her face was drooping on one side. And she realized at that moment she was having a stroke. And I don't think the people on the Zoom with her realized what was going on, but she knew the signs. And that's something that's very important, that we teach people what the signs of a stroke are. And it's very important that when something like that happens, you call 911. And that's exactly what she did. And she was able to get the help she needed as quickly as possible. Because again, there are horror stories about people who've had strokes. The singer Luther Vandross had a stroke, and I think he was in his home for several hours before he was found. And as a result, his brain was damaged to the extent that it caused him his life. So that's something that's very important to share with people. And there's some other things like legal plans and advanced directives and a lot of things that people don't think about that they need to know when it comes to brain health and other health issues. And so, as I said, we have a wealth of information on our website. So that's about all I have in terms of information, but I'll be glad to answer any questions that anyone has. And we can engage in a discussion around, what your interest and information about brain health. And I will stop sharing my screen. How do I stop now? Oh, stop share. Okay. So thank you very much for your time and attention. Does anyone have any questions?
Well, I just like, I just, started a discussion about having an advanced health directive, especially when you have a loved one who has something like dementia or Alzheimer's, because especially if your family members don't agree on what should happen to that person's assets, that could cause like a lot of confusion amongst the family. And I think it's important for people to think about what they want their final wishes to be before they become incapacitated or they can't remember certain important facts or, bank account numbers. I think that's an uncomfortable conversation for most people. I know my mom, before she passed away, would always say, well, nothing's going to happen to me. We can talk about that later. So I think it's important to talk with our loved ones, no matter what their age are, that every day we wake up is a gift. There's no guarantee. So somebody, won't wake up tomorrow. So in that event, what do you want to happen to your assets, and even if you don't have anything, because you all said, well, I don't have anything. Well, what do you want to happen to you? Just make sure that your wishes are written down so somebody knows.
Absolutely, Regina, and that is so important, and that's something that everybody needs to do regardless. And they need to do, as you said, they need to do it when they do have the presence of mind. But people don't want to accept their own mortality. They always think they have more time. Well, we saw in this past year with the numbers of people who passed of COVID-19 that time can end for anyone. Now, I'm a firm believer that people pass when it's their time to pass. I don't think that there is any magic to, if I hadn't done this or if I hadn't done that I would still be here. But at the same time, I think definitely by the age of 40, everybody should have some end of life plans on paper. Now, my mother, like I said, I kept talking to her about it, especially after my dad got sick. Do you know where this is? Do you know where that is? And my thing to her was, you don't have to tell me. You decide which one of us, and I assumed it to be one of the children. You decide which one of us you're going to trust with that information. And she chose my sister, my younger sister, in fact. And it was for two reasons. My younger sister is, like I said, she's the baby, as they say in the family. And she's not married. My brother and myself were both married, and she didn't have any children. And I think my mother was thinking along the lines of, not only is she responsible, but she has more to lose by my mother's death. I think that's what she was thinking, because she felt like we had our children to take care of us if something should happen to us. But my sister, on the other hand, did not have anybody, directly, as they say, what is it? Immediate family that, they kind of felt like they were each other's immediate family. And my sister did an excellent job, not only of caring for my mother till the end, but she's also done an excellent job of dealing with the estate issues. Because as Regina said, you think that nobody's gonna fight over I'm trying to think of something around here, your antique bowl that's been sitting on your table for 50 years, but somebody's going to fight over that bowl because everybody's going to want it at the end. So, even the smallest things you need to think about. And then even about how you want your services to go. I mean, I want to be cremated. My mother didn't agree with that, but my children surely know that that's how I want things to be. So I've begun the process of prepaying all that, so that won't be a burden to my children. And that's another thing people need to think about. But back to brain health. It's related. What we're talking about is related to brain health because, like I said, you want to do these things while your brain is still healthy. You want to do these things when you still can think clearly, that when you have your, your presence of mind, your complete faculty. Because otherwise, number one, it can be contested. And number two, your needs or your wants may not be carried out the way you want them to. So I know I'm rambling on, but Regina.
And I have another comment. I have an uncle who has Alzheimer's, and my cousin, we both did this DNA type of thing where you can find out where your ancestry comes from. And she did the genetic markers and found out that there's a genetic marker in our family that predisposes us to having dementia. So she's been bothering me about it, about getting the same genetic test done. What do you think about the role that genetics has in Alzheimer's or dementia, different forms of dementia?
I mean, you definitely have to consider it, but I think it's a crapshoot, to be honest with you. Excuse my vernacular, because even if you have the gene or the predisposition, it may not affect you directly. I've done do you know which one she did?
I think it was Ancestry. No, it was 23andMe. We did 23andMe.
And I've done 23andMe as well. Also listen to your elders and listen to the family histories. I always heard in my family that Uncle so-and-so, before he died, he just didn't have his mind anymore. And, and you listen to that and you begin to think that maybe it can affect you. That was one of me and my sister's big things when my dad developed dementia. We even talked to the doctor, and the doctor assured us that the type of dementia he had, which they considered to have been alcohol related, was not hereditary. But we had always heard the stories growing up that, Uncle so-and-so and Grandma whomever, just didn't have their wits about them, toward the end. But, we were assured, but the doctor didn't do any genetic testing on us. So he could not assure us with 100%, well, nothing's 100%, but he couldn't assure us with certainty that we did not have the gene. Now, again, I did do the 23andMe, and it did not come up that I was predisposed for dementia. It did come up that I was predisposed for, I think, heart attacks and something else. I can't think of it, but none of which have presented or manifested themselves in me. I know that I have hypertension. My mother had hypertension. My father did not. So again, I'm saying it can be a crapshoot. My sister does not have, has never, my sister nor brother have ever had any high blood pressure issues. And I'm also diabetic, and none of my family was diabetic, but my grandmother's sisters were diabetic. So like I said, genes, we know genes can do some very interesting things when they get, when you put them in the box and shake them up and things start to fall out. So I think that it now in the case of breast cancer, I know that there is a gene that predisposes women for breast cancer to the extent that some women have gone ahead and had elective mastectomies. That one seems to be a little bit more aggressive, especially, and of course, breast cancer being more aggressive among African-American women anyway. But I have personally not heard of any African-American women who have had elective mastectomies, to be honest with you. But I do know a number of women who, even close friends, that have had breast cancer. So there clearly is some predisposition for breast cancer in African-American women and men, because there have been a couple of famous men who have been diagnosed with breast cancer. And the key is always early detection. But a key in early detection is awareness. And that's another thing, like I said, we talk about in terms of brain health. People don't know to check it unless they know that it exists. And that's, as a faith-based organization, we talk about our people perish for lack of knowledge. Well, we're in the providing knowledge business. We want people to know as much about any number of health issues that they can, so that they can make informed decisions about their own health and advocate for themselves when they go to the doctor. because I've heard so many horror stories about how doctors are not sensitive and don't have good, we it's, called bedside manner, but, some of them just don't talk to people well and don't listen when people talk to them. There've been many people who have, I've heard that have, ended up, well, another family story. I have a cousin who was just a couple of years older than me. And she had colon cancer. She beat colon cancer, went through chemotherapy, the whole 9 yards. She retired in December, had a stroke in March, and died. Her daughter, who was in her 40s, I believe, when her mother died, went to the doctor one day, and she was diabetic. She had a very, I don't know if it was type 1 or type 2, but she had a severe case of diabetes. But she had just recently lost a lot of weight, and she was doing very well, but she lost feeling in her arm one day. And she went to the emergency room, and they told her, oh, that's just probably connected to your diabetes. She had a stroke, and now she's in a nursing home the rest of her life, because it had that, because they sent her home, and then she had the stroke, and they weren't able to help her quickly enough as they should have. So again, knowledge. People need knowledge, and actually the health community needs a lot of training around a lot of things too, especially being culturally sensitive to people's needs. I want to thank Tammy for finding that acronym for me, which was FAST. Face drooping for F, arm weakness in one or both arms, A. S is speech garbled speed, and T, time. Take action quickly once you recognize the symptoms. I got a funny story about garbled speech. We had a telephone one time, and I think most of our telephones now are, what are they called when they're through the internet? I think there's a term for that. So,
like Wi-Fi connected or Wi-Fi enabled, or?
Yeah, there was a company way back that really innovated in this. I forget, a VoIP. I don't know what that acronym stands for, but I was talking when I was married at the time, and I was talking to my husband, and I knew he had gone to work and he was really tired, and I was talking to him on the phone, and his speech began to be garbled, and it scared me to death because I thought he was having a stroke, but it was the internet feed that was fluctuating while we were talking. So, but that, I knew enough about strokes to detect the fact that garbled speech might be a problem, and that some people may not. Are there any risk assessments for dementia? Was a question from Regina. There are, but I don't know how good they are. And I know in the news this past week, there's been a lot of information about a new drug that they developed now that's supposed to help Alzheimer's patients. We have a couple of nurses on our staff, and I was talking to one of them the other day, and she was talking about it, and she was saying, the thing about this medication is you've got to know it's best if it's administered early. So again, knowing that you have some of the signs, and very often people, like my father hid the fact that he was not remembering things. He got lost one day. He drove someplace and couldn't remember how to get back home, and he didn't tell us. It really came to a head when he didn't make it home one day. He ended up spending the night at my grandmother's house. So it really got to a point that, and people often will either deny different signs, or they, discount different signs. So, again, making people aware and comfortable enough to talk about it, because there's stigma around anything that's brain related. I mean, people don't want to be. My daughter teases me to this day if I'm talking about something and I forget it. She says, "Okay, you're worrying me now. I might have." And she's always teasing me and saying, again, my sister is childless, and so she always tells me she's gonna put me and my sister in the same facility one day. And I'll tell her, just as long as you don't put us in the same room, I'm good. But, you know, again, just, you know, being able to have a good sense of humor about it, and being able to admit that you just may not remember things the way you used to, is something that should not be stigmatized. I know there's a question often comes up, is forgetting things just a normal part of aging? Yes and no, because many Alzheimer's patients or dementia patients remember more about when they were children than they remember what happened yesterday. So, and really vice versa. So you really have to take, you know, all the information and be very judicious about it as far as that's concerned. Tammy has a question. Is there a correlation between dementia, Alzheimer's, and mental health issues such as depression and anxiety? Tammy, I am not the person to ask that. That would be a good question to ask a true medical professional. I'm a public health professional, and I'm a schoolaholic, but I don't know the answer to that question. I know that stress, as I mentioned in the presentation, can affect dementia, well, brain health in general. So, you know, definitely anxiety causes stress. Depression causes stress. So my conjecture would be that there probably is, but I don't know. I don't have medical fact to back that up. So, and Elaine said she had to leave, so she has left us. So I'm trying to monitor the question a little bit. Are there any other questions? Okay, well, Regina, toss it back to you. I really appreciate your asking me to come on today, and I've really enjoyed doing this presentation. I have stood in for Pam before and done the brain health talk, but it's really not my comfort zone, and sometimes it's good to get out of your comfort zone. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And we appreciate you being available to talk with us about brain health and providing all those resources. So today's session was recorded, and it'll be available on YouTube either sometime today or by the end of the week. You'll be able to view the recording on our YouTube channel. So thank you so much, Tanya, Dr. Henderson, for joining us. Does anyone have any other questions they would like to talk about or to discuss as it relates to brain health? Or if you have any questions about the bomb in Gilead, I think Dr. Henderson would be able to, she would be happy to answer your question. And I just put the email, the website link to the Brain Health Center for African Americans in the chat box, if you want to go there and check out those resources.
Good presentation. Thank you, Tanya.
Thank you so much.
Yes, it was great. Loved it.
I like all the stories. And I'm sure we all have our similar stories that we can definitely relate to. So thank you so much. And I think this concludes today's session. And if you have any questions, you want to email us after, please feel free to do so. And y'all have a good rest of the day.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, thank you.